Excellent. All right, we're just going to wait a little bit just to make sure that everyone can log on. Everybody's logging on. Excited to have you here today, Miriam.
Excited to be here.
All right. Let's just give it 60 seconds. Hope everyone's having a good day. Miriam is in Singapore and it's nice and warm over there. I'm in Sydney and I hope everybody else is enjoying some good weather. All right. There's still people coming on. We'll give it 30 more seconds. All right, so hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar. I'm so glad you could join us for this exciting look into the future of HR. So we're about to embark on a journey in our working lives where artificial intelligence takes center stage, transforming the workplace as we know it. So to guide us through this fascinating landscape, we have a true expert in the field, Miriam Daucher, Principal and Regional Lead for HR Transformation in Asia at Mercer. Based in Singapore, Miriam brings a wealth of experience in all things HR transformation, from people strategies and employee experience design to the power of digital HR. She's passionate about helping organizations like yours navigate the ever-changing world of work. Now, today we're going to explore a few different things. We're going to have lots of data and interaction. We have the Q&A box down the bottom, so if there are any poignant questions you'd like to ask, we will have time to address those at the end of the webinar, and shoot us a message through. So we'll look at the evolving role of HR. We'll discover how HR is shifting from traditional roles to becoming champions of human well-being in the workplace, and some practical strategies for the AI age. We'll learn how to navigate the ethical complexities of AI and ensure its benefits. The use of it benefits all of humanity. So I just want to say thank you to Miriam again. So welcome today, and we're really, really excited to have you here.
Thank you, Emma. Thank you also for the very kind intro. So yeah, hello everybody. Thank you for joining me on your lunch break. I really appreciate it. I'll not bore you with some further introduction, but you might be able to tell by my accent, I'm originally from Germany. So if you're wondering where that accent is coming from, that's it. I've been with Mercer for over 8 years now, and I got to work across regions, across industries, but always in the field of HR transformations, which has been fascinating. And for the past year, I've been based here in Singapore, so now I get to explore the intricacies of the HR landscape in Asia, working very closely with my counterparts in Australia and New Zealand. So hopefully I can share some interesting insights with you today as well.
Excellent.
Yes. So for today, we're really going to cover a range of topics summarized under the future of HR. So really what I want to do with you today is, by the way, please connect with me on LinkedIn if you have any further questions. I'm more than happy to do that. So we'll start today with just a look at what's going on in the world. What are leaders concerned with? What's really driving these shifts in that increased focus on the role of HR? Of course, the elephant in the room is AI. So we will talk about the implications of that on the HR function as well. And to finish off, we'll have a little look into the future, like not just what are the big challenges of today, but how might the HR role be evolving and shifting as we go forward. Keep your phones ready, not just to scan the code for my LinkedIn profile, but you'll get to scan another code in a bit, because I'd also love to get some of your impact as we go through the presentation.
Excellent.
So what's going on? I think the one theme that everybody is telling us, everybody is discussing on a leadership level, is that things have been a bit more complicated than they used to be. So especially when it comes to the risks that are impacting our economies at large, but also organizations in particular, the consensus is really that it's become quite the poly crisis is the word we like to use here, where we say there's just so many different influences that we need to be aware of, and it's increasingly harder to really contextualize that for the business. There's some interesting insights in the World Economic Forum report that we worked on with them when it comes to the global risks. And when we ask employees and when we ask executives, so our C-level decision makers, on what do they think really impacts their business in the short term, like what are they most concerned with, we see some really interesting trends. And what you see here are really the top concerns of executives globally. Of course, unsurprisingly, this year we've seen inflation shoot up to the top, especially when we compare it to previous years. I think for a lot of markets, that is not a surprise, I have to say. It's not the same picture everywhere. But everything else you can really see here is that attention to now what do I do with my workforce? How do I need to evolve my organization in this new digital world is top of mind for a lot of them. So digital acceleration, the rise of flexible working, how can we really react to this is a big issue. Interestingly, these seem to have also pushed down the cyber risk a little bit, and we'll talk a bit about what that means when we need to pay attention to how we approach AI in a bit. So this is what they're concerned with, but what are they actually doing? So interestingly, the areas where executives say they will not make any compromises, even if times are hard, is definitely to continue to invest in AI and automation for the organization. Also, interesting people topic, top of mind for executives. That's not something we have seen in just 5 years ago. Reskilling and learning, really top of the agenda here. And of course, broader digital transformation. When it comes to where we put the money, HR is usually not the first place they think about. So about 1/3 of them is looking to reduce HR headcount. The vast majority wants to keep it roughly at the same level. So increasing additional investment into HR, not really the case. So the theme that we have to deal with here is really how can we do more with less as an HR function? And I went ahead and pulled some data from Australia, New Zealand. So that's what you can see here with the Pacific data, where we see a little bit of a bit different picture. I mentioned inflation is not top of mind in every market. So that is the case for Pacific. Interestingly, especially flexible working and of course, environmental factors like extreme weather events and climate disasters are much more prevalent in the region. So that is definitely a trend that is quite different from other regions that we see. And also when we look at the investments, actually reskilling and learning is top of the list in that region. So even more important than AI and automation. And we have another one creeping in here on third place where it's all about headcount invest. And Emma made a little discussion already about what does this mean for reviewing salaries? What does it mean for our bonus pools? So quite interesting to see that different flavor in the region here.
Yeah.
And when we ask leaders about, how ready do you think your organization is to take all of these on? We do see some optimism, which is nice to see. So especially when we compare it to previous numbers, there is quite some more. So we have 38% versus 27% when it comes to business agility. How flexible is your business in adjusting to these changes? Definitely a bit more confidence here. Also slightly more confidence in HR in terms of how flexible are we to react to this. When we look at the Pacific numbers, yes, even more confident in the business, slightly less confidence in HR. So quite interesting to see where our executives, our business leaders stand here. And of course, we also look at agility on a broader scale. And what does seem to work for successful growing organizations in this challenging climate is to really put forward an agenda on how can we leverage skills a bit more, how can we democratize decision making, just to stay quick and to stay reactive, but also of course prioritizing any type of digital adoption in the organization seems to be a common denominator for these types of organizations. So that's a bit setting the scene from the C-level lens, but we are here to talk about HR, right? So let's do that. And for this exercise, I'd love to hear from you first. So go ahead and scan the QR code, please. Alternatively, use any device to go to menti.com and enter that code I put here. So 8830850 would be the code. And I'm switching to that presentation now. So when you think about HR topics today, what is top of mind for you? I just want to make sure we can relate to it throughout the presentation. I would be really interested what you're thinking about. Yes, responses coming in. Talent, engagement, development. Oh, yes. So definitely tight labor market as well. The reskilling agenda is coming through. So the whole life cycle from recruitment to development, experience. Yes, I love to see that. But it's not just how do we get them and retain them, but how do we have a great experience? Process optimization, uplift capabilities, I assume also for HR. That's usually an important discussion. We have leadership. I love to see it because I always say HR is really a core leadership discipline. I think just getting out of that support function mindset is really important. But of course, we need strong leaders who are embracing the right mindset here. So I love to see it. Ability to adopt AI, yes, we'll talk about that. A continuous interest in working from home. The implications of burnout, okay. Legal changes, yes, very, very localized. So what I do see here is, on the one hand side, encouraging because you have the focus on, kind of the right topics. But then, of course, it also mirrors that broader confusion that we do see with there's so many challenges we seem to tackle at once. So where do we start? So hopefully today I'll give you a little bit of an insight what this means. And we still have answers coming in. We'd love to see it. Yes, thank you for sharing. So I'll allude to these topics as we go through the presentation. So when we are talking, how do we take action? I'd love to hear from you. How would you rank certain priorities? So I pulled out 10 of them. So do go ahead and put these into a ranking that makes sense to you from most to less important. I assume they are probably all important, but I'd love to hear to see the picture here. And you see some of the themes I picked out mirror what you have shared with me, so that's good to see. HR capabilities, employee experience, talent processes. Oh, here we go. Yeah, that mirrors our previous picture of talent assessment and development. Yes, AI at the forefront in the redesigning work category. People managers, the leadership theme coming out strongly as well. Experience is climbing up. That's good to see. Love to see the awareness for the HR analytics capabilities. Just waiting for a few more answers to come in because this one is a bit harder to fill out. Oh, leadership is climbing to the top. Interesting.
Like a race. I love it.
Yes, it is. So some of the less important ones is pay practices, financial well-being. So I'm not saying it's not important, but less of a priority this year. AI dropped down. Okay, interesting. Sustainability in the middle here. Oh, employee experience made it all the way to the top. You do see that tension in the talent market, I suppose.
Yeah.
Oh, the leaders coming up again. Here we are. Oh, interesting. Well, I'll keep that open for a while if you want to still put your answer in. But for now, remember what we see here. We have employee experience at the top, leadership quite strong, the talent processes, strategic workforce planning really top of the list. And I did this exercise to show you the contrast to some of the global data that we have on that. So same list, the same themes, but what do we see on a global scale?
Oh.
And similar to what you just did, we have employee experience to retain the top talent on the top. Strategic workforce planning slightly higher, but it was still in your top 5. AI and automation a lot higher than what you rated here. But also people analytics skills. We have overall people manager skills a little lower, and the talent assessment skills development a bit lower on the list. So that is HR's perspective. What I always find interesting is if we contrast that to what executives are thinking. And here, we see a fundamental disconnect, unfortunately, still, where we see, yes, there is overlap in the topics, but a lot of the things that are really important for executives, like when we look down here at improving on sustainability, accountability, metrics, reporting, the whole ESG topic, that is really so important for executives, not really top of mind for HR on how we can make strides here. Likewise, redesigning work and automation, that's something that is really important. But when it comes to strategic workforce planning, HR is super aware of that. Employee experience, likewise, not top of list for employees. So what's the story we see here? So the story is that while executives look at it from a different lens, I think the underlying root cause might be quite similar. Ultimately, what executives want to drive here with their digital agenda, with their agenda on ESG, is to really make sure the business is running smoothly, and also we keep productivity high, right? That's the underlying theme. And HR might have a little bit of a different approach on how to get there. So I do think it might not be that fundamental misalignment. Maybe it's also different in how we are talking to each other, because as you can see, the executives also believe that HR technology should play a major role here. They believe HR is not ready itself on the digital side to take this on. That does not feature on HR's top 10 priorities. So I do think often it's just that conversation that still needs to happen.
Yeah.
And this one, sorry, for this one, I also
that communication piece, isn't it?
It is. I think that's the fundamental issue here often. Pacific does look quite different. I have to say it's the region that is the most different from some of our global trends when I look at them. And there's definitely on number one, HR functions are looking to really invest more in physical mental health benefits. So that is top of mind. We had burnout in our poll earlier. So really important to keep that focus here. We also still have employee experience in the top three. I think in this group it was number one, so more aligned to the global trends, but to really still keep a high attention to that. And we also have a slightly brighter picture when it comes to aligning with executives in Pacific, it seems, because sustainability is a bit higher in the ranking. And also it's the only region where rolling out HR technology has made it into the top 10 in terms of awareness from the HR side. So, I love to see that there seems to be a recognition of what needs to happen. And I already mentioned the underlying reason for a lot of this push and a lot of this expectation from the executives is productivity, because ultimately, how can we care about our people if our businesses are not healthy, right? If we're not delivering. And we ask executives and we ask employees on their perspective to, what is hindering productivity? And the top contenders here are pretty much aligned, where we say everybody says it's too much busy work. We don't have enough time to think. And we also have maybe an ineffective work structure that might not be set up in a way that really unlocks that productivity and gives us these efficiencies. So everybody is complaining about the same thing, right? And also, speaking of employees, there are some other things that are coming from this lens where, we talked about the employers. They are not too confident to say, well, we have the talent models in place to achieve that productivity, to achieve the growth. We do believe AI might be a way to solve this, but we also have employees who are already saying, well, my company is not meeting my needs. We have that risk of burnout that we've also seen from you, and we have people who just don't want to work at all anymore. So we have these shifting perspectives here and these shifting lenses to why do things need to change. And of course, elephant in the room, now we are here in this area, it's AI. Everybody's looking to AI to solve for some of these issues. So to not only solve for more efficiency, but also to maybe it can help with some of these struggles that employees are also having. Can it help us with that busy work, with that not having enough time to think? That is really the big hope here. And HR does play a fundamental role to make this a success. Because organizations that are already deploying AI are saying, yes, we do see an increase in productivity, especially when it comes to data analysis, better decision making, and also even for innovation. So it's not just this more manual side of things, but also creating new things. And that, of course, raises expectations, right? But we also see some of the more concerning voices in the market saying, hey, AI is here to take our jobs, it's taking over the whole workforce. When we ask executives, they actually think, a majority of them think that we need to replace jobs, not people. So we really need to get a handle on the good data and the talent insights in order to make sure we make the right decisions here. So the agenda is not to replace everybody that's human. It might even be an answer to these talent challenges, right? Even in your ranking, talent acquisition, talent development was a top concern, top of your mind. This might be an answer to it because we have tight labor markets. If we can do more with the resources we have, if we can keep people because we have less boring, busy work, that could maybe help us solve here. Unfortunately, our HR leaders are not quite convinced that they are ready to lead that conversation and that transformation. So I think there's a bit more work to do to get HR on this journey.
Yep.
And that back to you here. We are back in, it should be the same link, same presentation. Second. Here we are. Oh, we had a slight change since we last looked at this. But for the next question, when it comes to generative AI in particular, how would you rank your level of knowledge, your familiarity with the topic? Oh, yes. So we have the categories of very basic or no knowledge, having played around a bit, using it for work-related tasks, or full expertise. So the biggest bucket seem to be people who are already using it at work. So that's an encouraging picture. But don't worry, if you're not there yet, that is not an issue. I hope we'll get more insights today. Having played around a bit, that's amazing. No experts so far. So, well, if you're interested in becoming an expert, let's talk. But I think that is an encouraging picture to say, hey, the majority has at least the basic understanding of what it is we're talking about. And, you know, in order to play around with it for work-related tasks, there's one thing that's really key, which is, does your organization offer you an enterprise large language model? So a ChatGPT in your organization, is that something that you have access to? I would be interested in that, because obviously that would help. Okay, even picture. We have a little race here. Mm-hmm. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because a lot of the concerns when it comes about data security, when it comes about really some of the ethical side of things, that can be mitigated if an enterprise GPT or LLM or whatever we call it is rolled out. Because when you think about it, yes, technically we could do all of these things in ChatGPT, right? We could have a private account, we could upload all of our company files, and we could get an answer. But that's probably not the best idea to do that. So an analogy I like to use, and I borrowed that from a lovely colleague of mine, is to say, well, ChatGPT and its competitors like Claude are really like a little kid. So when you think about it, a little kid picks up something at home, it hears something, maybe it's not supposed to hear. It runs off to the playground, to kindergarten, and really just tells everybody what's been going on. So that's what we are trying to avoid, right? To get information out there that's not supposed to be there. Whereas when you have an enterprise GPT, LLM, and it's set up in a secure way, you can think about it more like a colleague. Like it will behave like an employee of the company in terms of sharing information, adhering to guidelines. So a lot of the concerns when it comes to really working with these new generative AI tools are mitigated if you have a secure environment to do it in.
I love that analogy, Miriam.
Yeah, I love it too. By the way, my favorite analogy I'm also using is I'm calling my own. We have an enterprise GPT, by the way. Ours is called Len AI because we're part of Marsh McLennan. I call it my smart little intern. That's cool. It's so much potential, but doesn't understand any context at all. So I need to very clearly review everything I get, and I also need to give very clear instructions what I want. Otherwise, it's not going to be helpful. So when we talk about AI, why is everybody talking about it? And it's been almost 2 years, right, since ChatGPT burst on the scene and really changed the game. And the way we talk about it is as a printing press moment. So to really say, yeah, our world has been changing. We had technology development. There's new software, new iPhones, new everything for the past decades. But why is this different? And it's because in the history of humanity, there's been very few instances where things change and have been fundamentally different than before. And one of these first instances is the printing press back before, in the 15th century in Germany, by the way. So it's all about now we can really mass produce knowledge. We have access to a lot of information for a much broader population. And it's really accelerated that interconnectedness of thinking and really collaborating. Likewise, later on, when we, all of a sudden we had power, we had electricity, eventually we had phones and fax machines and the internet. And when you think about the organizations that well, this is a fad, like, I don't think I'll need an email. I think we can just continue with our in-house mailing system. Where do you think these companies are today if they didn't adopt that change? And this is one of these instances where it's just fundamentally changing how things need to run, how things need to work. And it's also a lot of opportunity in here. But it also means if you want to be part of this revolution, you need to act now. And earlier I alluded to that kind of almost fear-mongering in some of the headlines when it comes to AI is coming over and taking our jobs. And yes, that is true to a degree. I wouldn't say it's taking over jobs, I'd say it's taking over work. So what do I mean by that? So it's true that about 80% of jobs are impacted by generative AI and how the work is being done. And about 20% of jobs will be so vastly impacted that we might not recognize them. So about 50% of the work they do is so impacted that we need to think about how do we distribute some of that. But for every job, no matter in which category here it falls, it's true that there's multiple types of work. And that's really true for if you are in one of these 20%, or if you are more of a knowledge worker, or if you are even a researcher. It could be really anything. We have 3 types of work you do. And the 3 buckets are transactional, relational, and expertise work in our point of view. And transactional is really all that busy work I mentioned earlier, where we say this is administrative work, operational work, and even in like not very administrative processes like recruiting, we do have a lot of operational tasks, like you need to schedule stuff, you need to document things in the system, like, that's not why people do that. I don't think anybody enjoys that very much. Then we also have relational work. This is where you spend time with colleagues or clients or your business partners to really say, we are collaborating, we are brainstorming together, we are building a human connection. I'm trying to help you, you're trying to help me. That is a part of every job. And lastly, expertise, where we say, this is your wealth of experience and really knowledge that you bring to a job. So what's happening to these buckets? The first one is the one everybody talks about. So transactional work getting vastly reduced. This is where we have that potential for a huge productivity gain of up to 30% to say, hey, AI is taking over all the scheduling and the documenting and the summarizing stuff and writing emails and all this kind of thing can be done so much quicker if we leverage it. But that also means now we have time for the things that really create more value. And when we talk about relational work, every people manager I talk to says, yeah, well, I really want to be a good people manager. I want to develop my employees. I want to help them in their career, but I don't have the time for that. Like we have our performance reviews. I fill that out, but I need to keep the business running first and foremost. And this is an opportunity where we can really create space for these important conversations, this building the human connections. And not just have more time, but also make it better. So it's not just about quantity, but also quality. And when we think about utilizing generative AI, it can really help us prepare for these conversations to say, hey, I have scenarios where I need to talk to my employee. I have multiple sources of information. What does it mean? What kind of feedback do I want to give? I can even role play more critical situations. So I go into this conversation much more prepared and also with a much better approach. So this can really increase the quality of this type of relational work. Likewise with expertise work. You don't need to be a rocket scientist to do expertise work. You could be a compliance and benefit expert. You could be the recruiter who knows who would be the best fit. So this is why we need that AI and human collaboration, where we say, yes, AI can make suggestions, it can help you, but ultimately we need you to check if that is the right decision, if you missed out on anything. Like in my example, you wouldn't let the intern make the final decision. Like they can help you prepare the draft and all of that, but ultimately you need your expertise to do this. And AI can also help you be quicker here, get more done, because if you need to research, like, what are typical compliance policies, you can read through 20 of those. So they have probably about 200 pages each. Maybe you just want the gist and you can use generative AI to give you a summary and the highlights. So it's really about being creative and how you apply it. And because transactional, relational, and expertise is a bit hard to say all the time, what I like to say is hands work, heads work, hearts work. So the key takeaway from this session is to really, hands work is what we want to get away with. That's that transactional piece, right? This is where we want AI automation to come in and really help us free up time. Heads work is expertise work. This is where we can be quicker, more efficient, easier, and we can have somebody help us here. And ultimately, if we get these two right, we have much more time for the human side, for the hearts work. So this is ultimately what we are trying to do here. And when you think about how AI is really impacting work at large, there's more than one area. So what I've been talking about here is the first one. I talked about how is AI coming in and changing work. Yes, it's coming in and making us question these three buckets. It's really about now, if we have these different types of work, how are jobs changing? How can we make the time for these things? And that's a fundamental new question and new portfolio item for HR to also guide organizations on, to really help organizations in this transformation to understand how is work changing. Of course, that's also true for the workforce, because if work is changing, what does that mean for them? Like, do they need different skills? What does a career look like if things are changing so quickly? We need different skills. So to really, for HR to lead the charge here in terms of having a good strategy in place, how do we upskill our workforce? How do we have strategic workforce planning based around these new skills? If we do that, the employee experience is also changing, not just because everybody has access to maybe these new tools, and that means their work experience is different, but it also means what are we really putting forward as the employee value proposition? And that also ranked very highly for you, right? I think in the end it landed up on spot number 2, but if we do that, if careers are more fluid, if we think about work differently, how do we pay people? Like, you know, what skills do we pay a premium for? So we really need to understand what are the implications here. And last but not least, HR itself. Like, how can we lead the way here if we are not a role model? And that's really my message here. Like, this is a great opportunity and a great point in time for HR to take that role, to say, hey, we will guide through all these different changes. We will help organizations really understand how work is changing, what it means for the workforce. And we'll also show, be a good example on our own end. Like, we can incorporate it into our processes. We are rethinking how our work goes. Our jobs are changing and what skills we need to be successful in the future. And of course, in order to do a lot of these things, we need to get much better when it comes to data. Like, that is really the key to unlock a lot of this. Because I mentioned, yes, enterprise GPTs, LLMs would be a great thing to have, but they are only as great as the data that they can pull from. You know, if we don't have good people insights, good people data, it cannot really help us predict a lot of these things. If we have a lot of bias in our data, we'll need a lot of that expertise, that heads work from our HR experts to find these points of bias and to really critically question where the AI might be misled here. So I do think HR can take a very important role here in this equation. So when I say HR leading the way, there's HR organizations who are already doing this. There's things everybody here can already start trying. Like, I'm not saying share your confidential employee data on ChatGPT and Claude, please. That's not what I'm saying. But what you could do, if you haven't done it already, especially those people that said they have a very basic understanding, try creating job ads. Try to be very specific with specific job roles and use ChatGPT to help you get there. I think that is a very, very basic use case. You're not sharing anything confidential. It's pulling information from the internet. but really think about how can it help me in all of my processes. So sticking with recruitment, not just how can I create a job ad, how can I create a great LinkedIn message to reach out to somebody? What would be great email communication? If I have the profile from somebody on LinkedIn, what would be great interview questions to ask them when it comes to this role? So you can play around with a lot of public information without actually having to share it, and familiarize yourselves with prompting, getting better at that, getting really that exercise, and I recommend it to everyone. But of course, across the entire talent lifecycle, we have a lot of things that we could do. Like if we have our own internal data, of course, we can unlock this whole world of workforce planning in a whole new degree. To say now we can have this predictive analytics, we can move more towards the skill side. We can also already start thinking about the employee experience, like can we use AI to subsidize that career coaching, to really have maybe a chatbot, somebody that's really helping us here to have easier access to information and really just a direct contact besides just the human resources that we do have in the function to reach out to. And of course, it also means, can we use it for that example for the people managers? You ranked that very highly. How can we think about using generative AI to make our people managers better, to help them have better conversations, to help them get the information they need? So I'm not talking about all of these examples right now. You'll get the slides, don't worry, but there's really, this is not an exhaustive list either, but to really be creative with every step of the way on how you can use generative AI to further your capabilities in the function and also to be more efficient in your work so you have more time for what really matters. Because the reality is time is really the crunch. We saw limited investment from executives into the HR function, and we already see the strain in the HR function when it comes to what we are able to do today. And our data shows that we are mostly in a pyramid setting, which you can see here, where we say about 60% of HR work is stuck in that administrative part. So that is this transactional work, that is this operational work. And it's not just HR operations, it's, as I mentioned, also in other processes, all that documentation and data pulling and reporting and just a lot of manual work. So that means we have very little time for consulting, partnering, really the core of the work we'd like to do. And even less time on figuring out, hey, how should we change? What should be our strategy? How do we as a function need to evolve? So if you look at the right-hand side, what we want to do is achieve more of a diamond shape. So think about these gray boxes helping us cut it down to say we use automation, we really radically simplify our processes, our own organizational setup, our operational setup, to slim down the admin part. And that really unlocks additional capability for us to think about where do we need to go? How can we support our leaders? How can we run more projects? Because in most HR operating model benchmarks, HR projects are not accounted for. And I don't know a single HR practitioner or function that doesn't run projects today. I do think most functions run like that. So aside of your daily work, you really need to account for this project side of things to continuously innovate. So only if we achieve that, if we truly leverage it, I think we have time to become that partner to help redesign work, to help reshape the workforce, and also to uplift the employee experience. And when we talk about HR functions, so what's kind of keeping you from doing that? Oftentimes the answer is, yeah, we just can't find the right talent. We also, we are too concerned about data and data security and privacy. So there's a lot of hesitation around the digital side. And I have to say, yes, that is true. The answer might, however, be let's be a little bit more brave. And also let's think about digital a bit broader than just technology. And when we see what successful organizations and successful HR organizations are doing differently, we can see some interesting patterns that are related to the digital agenda, but are not necessarily just focused on technology. So what we do see here is a true commitment to being more agile, to also not just redesign work with the 3 buckets of heads work, hearts works, hands works in HR, but to also think now, how do roles change? Maybe, we need to upskill our own folks. Maybe we need to be more flexible as to what our business partners are doing. And maybe our whole offering needs to be tailored more towards our population. So a true target group focused approach is what we see emerging with persona exercises, with understanding user journeys, with really centering the leaders and the employees' needs is how we see HR operating models shifting. And a few very specific examples, I think we can also find here in what we like to call our equation for successful HR transformation. And the core message here I want you to remember from today, digital is not just technology. I said that before, but what else is it? And this is what you can see here. So technology is part of it. It is there, but there's so many other things we need to consider. And the first one it starts with is really mindset. So everything I told you already is all about now, how do we position ourselves? What is our mandate? How do we help organizations transform in this world? How do we also truly understand that this needs to be a continuous exercise? We can't just run through an operating model, redesign, and then for 6 months, and then that's it, we are transformed. That doesn't cut it anymore. We really need to continuously evolve and build that into our own operating model. We also need to truly center people. We've seen this is what other organizations that are doing well are doing. So to listen to the employees, don't just assume that you know what they want, to really understand these, especially critical target groups, and design experiences that really matter for them, design services that really matter for them. And when we are designing services, think about journeys, not processes. So think about what does this feel like? Does our population need to dial into 5 different HR technology tools when they're looking for information? Do they even know where to go? I think generative AI can be a real solution here where we say, hey, we have a smart chatbot, I can ask these things. It might even be able to execute some of the tasks for me. But to, even without AI, to really think, now what is the experience like? And how can we maybe design journeys that work for employees and managers and not processes from HR for HR because it makes sense for us? I think that's one of the biggest hurdles we've seen in the past. And of course, technology is our enabler here. It's a big lever to make all of this work, but it shouldn't be front and center. So when we are applying generative AI, like when we are also implementing any new HR technology, it's important to not skip the other parts of the equation, because that's when we see a huge investment in tools and it doesn't really plan out. We don't see a redesign of processes before we move to the cloud, and then everybody's unhappy with the ROI. Like, that's really what we're trying to avoid here. So the answer is don't skip the other parts, please. So these are the big challenges of today. I promise I'll finish off so we have time for questions, but I have one more final food for thought for you. And this is not just what are we dealing with today, but what's coming next? What's really challenging us? What is coming up on the HR agenda? And we already alluded to it. What role does HR play in the age of AI, but broader? How does HR become a truly human-focused function? It's right there in the name, but I think oftentimes we lost a little bit of that. And I think most HR practitioners went into the field not because they like to do policies and reporting, but because they actually want to work with humans and for humans. So how can we make sure these inevitable digital challenges are actually serving humanity and we can work together? So in where we are today, what's happening tomorrow, you can see we do come from a more focused on just keeping the lights on, keeping things running. Most HR organizations today are really grappling with what we see here in the middle, where we say AI is coming in, how do we redesign work? How can HR support the business? How can we help workers not to get lost here? How can we communicate to them and get them on the journey? That's the big question of today. How do we keep organizations agile with work design, with skills, with whatever approach you're taking here? And how can we really improve the employee experience to meet our talent needs? But what's happening next are really broader questions, like how can we make sure the human doesn't get lost? How can we make sure all these efficiency gains in the bucket actually get redistributed into relational expertise work and don't just get loaded back into profits? I think that's a fundamental position HR needs to take here. It's also, how do we adhere to our own ESG standards? How can we be the champions against bias, to really be the herald of that? And to really keep the humans in the center. And that might mean sometimes it might be a harder discussion with the business, because while AI has a lot of potential to increase productivity, we need to be honest that if we rationalize everything away today, we might have bigger challenges tomorrow. Just think about the younger generations coming into the pool. They need to have a chance to have time for relational work, to learn from others, but also to build that expertise muscle. If we say AI is coming in, we don't need any more junior positions. Well, who's going to be your senior in 5 years' time? Like, let's be realistic. So it might not always be the most profitable decision that's keeping you successful in the long run. And this is really where I want HR to take on charge, to really say, hey, we need to think about the human element here. We need to think about how technology can serve the humans and make us all better. That's at least my moment. That's why I'm so excited we're in this age, because for once I think we have a real opportunity here. And so I use this to kind of summarize what I talked to you today, but also give a little outlook for the future. And thank you for listening to me. I could ramble about this for hours, as you might be able to tell, but I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear some of your questions so we can dive deeper together.
I love that. Submit your questions if you've got any questions there. But one thing that I loved you talking about, and especially at the end around bringing junior people in and building them and building their expertise. Like it doesn't, like a lot of executives might look at that profit line first and get excited because they've got this AI to take over that more junior work. But I love how you said that you've got to think about the future and that future leader, and giving people more time to be able to spend with the human being and putting that at the center of everything is like, it's a very strong purpose. And I think that with HR evolving and that future of HR, looking at that is a really, like, it's exciting, and it brings that purpose into the work that they're doing again. Because you and I were discussing before, Miriam, that this year has been really focused on that rearview mirror and the compliance and the risk and everything. But yeah, a lot of people that we talk to going into HR, it is about looking after that, the people element. So it's exciting. Now, there's a couple of questions coming in. So from Emily, when's the best time to prepare an organization for AI when they're already experiencing change fatigue?
Mm-hmm. I do think it's, we can't wait around any longer. That's my personal my personal answer to that. But it's about how you go about it. Like, we need to be realistic. We're not AI is not changing every part of your organization in the same way. And also, it's not realistic to, expect that from everybody to take on these challenges in the same way. So what we've seen a lot of success with is to really identify some pilot areas of the business. Typically, that would be maybe some of the more digital jobs that exist in every organization. You don't need to be a tech organization to have these types of roles, and really think about how is work changing here. So to really start with that work design lens of, your hands work, your heads work, your hearts work for some of these roles. And then think about, hey, can we have use cases where we can already automate some of the hands work, or, use AI to maybe help us here. But also, can I give those people the right skills to use it for their expertise, for their heads work? I think that is how you want to get started. And the best way to go about this is to go into dialogue. So once again, not assume that you know what's happening in these types of roles. Do your research, don't get me wrong, but make this a collaborative exercise with that pilot population. And really, as soon as you have some success stories, and as soon as people are excited about it and share it, you'll see other parts of the business will want to follow.
I was going to say, maybe as an extension to that question is, what data points would you look at first in terms of being able to communicate the adoption of AI or part AI in the business?
Yeah, I mean, that's a little tricky, because in most organizations where we have an enterprise LLM rolled out, they are mostly using about, typical usage, general uptake, things like that. But it's kind of hard to get reporting on what people are actually doing with the tool. And I think that's much more interesting. So what you usually want to do with the data is identify those power users. That's usually possible to figure out who are the people who use it every day, who use it for like at least 20 times a week for like little requests and things like that, and ask them, how are you actually doing it? What are you doing it? What are you doing there? And is there anything that's specific to your role? Or is it probably also some more general behaviors that we can then roll out as guidelines for the broader organization? I do see a lot of success in looking at data in this way, but oftentimes it's not really telling us the full story. So we'll need some further investigation.
Yeah,
and also when it comes to data, if you're using it for people insights, really think about what you're using it for. And I mean, oftentimes it could be to review some compensation, or, figure out something in preparation for your strategic workforce planning. That is all right and good, but often this is also the area where we need to be very conscious of biases, as I mentioned. So before you even do any analysis, come up with hypotheses on where you expect bias to be, so you can have that very good conversation with the tool. Like, I always like to question, especially if it's recommending specific candidates for an internal position, or it's showing me certain salary discrepancies. I like to ask, is there a gender bias in here? Would this look differently if we looked at it from a gender perspective, or any other, ethnical or religious minority kind of lens? But to really embrace that DEI thinking when you do your data analysis.
That's really interesting. So if you have an enterprise LLM, this might be like a stupid question, but will it give reports on what people are searching for? Can it give you a health check of what's happening in the business?
Yeah, could be. It's not going to be visible for everybody. I do recommend very strongly for HR to have a seat at the table, because that will be an information that you'll have at a quite high level in terms of what are people using it for, what are top requests. I want to recommend for everybody at least have one HR leader part of that, because that's also how we see ethical AI to really be shaped in a sustainable way. It's if you have a cross-functional team of people thinking about it. So you'll have your HR representative, you have your compliance, your legal lens, but you also have, of course, your digital expertise and your business strategists. To really come together and do that. So it is absolutely possible to see this kind of thing, but you need to, once again, come up with what is it we are looking for, why are we looking for it, and the information we see, question it. I do recommend always question why you're seeing the things you're seeing.
Yeah, interesting. And how do you think AI will impact the recruitment process?
Yeah, I think that's one interesting case, because historically talent acquisition has been like the more innovative one, because it's not so tied to all the other internal data and processes. So even before AI, I saw like the most innovation when it comes to HR tech from the talent acquisition space. And also it seems like our talent acquisition experts seem to be a bit more open to adopting it, to experimenting with it. So that's been really one of the areas where we saw the most movement. So where we can now also say we have some insight into how it's actually changing. So I would say my previous experience where I say try and come up with a job ad with a ChatGPT, for example. That's what people did 2 years ago. Let's be honest, you're already behind if you haven't tried that. So
yeah, absolutely.
So I don't think anybody types up this type of thing manually anymore in a lot of organizations. And I think the one thing that's really helping us here is to not just be efficient, but be better. So to really, question once again in the job ad, is this an inclusive way of phrasing it? How could I maybe target this to a specific audience that I'm trying to reach? Is that tone of voice resonating? How can I use this on LinkedIn? Things like that. And of course, that interconnectedness throughout the process. So once I have interesting profiles, as I mentioned, come up with the right interview questionnaire, come up with a way of having less bias in scoring, have your results, your documentation also in there. Be quicker with documentation, by the way, if you can use recordings, that would also be useful. And then ultimately, don't forget. Can I say one more thing? I love this. I used to be a recruiter, so yeah.
Yeah, so you know a lot about it, and most recruiters are very bad administrators.
Yeah, guilty. But the thing is, don't think about the recruiting process ending with signing the contract. Think about all this great information you have collected in the process, and think about, now, how can I use this for the onboarding, for the development of this new employee coming in? And I think also this is where AI can really help, because we can say, hey, based on the strengths and weaknesses, what would be a great onboarding plan for this person? How can we help them in their development? If it is linked to the development options in your organization, it can even come up with a personalized training plan for the first year. So don't be limited too much by what we can do here.
I love that. Really love that. That's great. Any more questions before we log off? We're just at the end of our time. If you do have any other questions that you wanted answered or you think about later, please send them through to me or to Miriam. We will be sending out a copy of this, and this presentation will also be on our podcast, so you can listen to it later if there's anything that you want to review. Thank you, Miriam. We really, really appreciate your time and data and insights and expertise. So we're very grateful to have you today.
No, thank you for having me. Always happy to continue the conversation. So do reach out to me. I'm not gonna put in a whole marketing thing for Mercer here. I think you know Mercer, but of course, if you're interested in diving deeper into any of these topics, also let me know. Other than that, I hope this was a very constructive lunch break for you. I hope you learned something. I'd love to get some feedback as well, and hope you have a good rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.